All right, welcome back to Michelle and Mickey's Performance Podcast. For all of our avid listeners, we are going to kick it off today with a little bit of discussion around hormones and hormone health, primarily around women's hormones, although we might touch on some men's hormones too. I mean, I can think of some examples in my own coaching repertoire. So yeah, Michelle, first off, how are you doing, Michelle?
I'm hanging in there.
Hanging in there, yeah.
In this conversation, Mickey, and just so for people, for those who are listening, like commonly Mickey and I get on and we talk for like a half an hour before, and then we're like, oh, we should hit record, and a lot of times those conversations, so Mickey's, how old are you, Mickey? 43?
46.
44?
No,
46. Oh gosh.
yeah.
Okay. You're older than I thought. Like maybe when I met you, I don't know. Okay. So Mickey's 46. I'm 51. And a lot of times we're talking about hormones, right? And like, what is your hormone status? And like, what are you doing about your hormones? And this is a conversation that like when she and I are both very interested in, and we're having sort of behind closed doors, if you will, or just like not out in the open. And we're sort of thinking that maybe we should talk about this stuff out in the open. So that's what we decided we're going to do today. And then we definitely want to preface this with like, we're not doctors. We are, coaches, and we're reasonably educated, but we're not doctors. And so what we're not doing here is offering like medical advice. And I probably should have looked up some sort of like disclaimer or waiver or whatever, but like consider this my disclaimer or waiver. We're not offering you medical advice, but what we are going to offer you today is like our experience, what we've learned, what we've been through. And then we may share some experiences as well with like of athletes that we have worked with, or like the ones that have shared with us, like different things. And so for those of you who are not interested in like perimenopausal hormone stuff, you can just shut this off now. Like this probably isn't for you. But if you're a woman between say like, let's say 35, I feel like before 35, for me, before even 40, I was not interested in any of this stuff. And I knew that there were women talking about it, and I was just like, I don't care. So if that's you, it's fine, turn it off. If you've already been through menopause and you're like, I already dealt with all that shit, I don't have to deal with it again, fine, turn this off. But if you're between like 35 and 53, probably, I'm going to guess 54, in that range, you may find this really interesting. And like, listen, we want to hear your experience too. So like if you, write to us and tell us what, like if anything we said, you're like, oh, I totally relate to that, or that wasn't my experience at all,
Yeah.
happy to
Yeah,
hear
I will
your
say,
input. So
even if you're, you are postmenopausal, but you're in the earlier stages, right? So, there are some stuff. And so sometimes like, because this isn't, well, there's a lot of, it's talked about, but the details are confusing and you get conflicting information sometimes. And so there might be things that we talk about or discuss that you resonate with. And so and again, we're not going to provide any, like, oh, you should do this, you should do that. But we might talk about like what has worked, what I have read about, what we've read about, right, in our own quest for knowledge here that may prompt you to want to go and talk to your primary care provider, your gynecologist, right, to discuss some of these things. Because, yeah, it's multifaceted, right? There's tons of different symptoms and there's tons of different ways to go about trying to solve what the symptoms are, right? Ultimately, we can't solve menopause or perimenopause, right? Like it will happen, just like death. So I mean, maybe there's
okay, let's not put menopause and death like.
well, there are two things that are certain, right? Like, unless unfortunately, and if you are unfortunate and pass away before menopause, right, then you will not have that experience. But it's not like if you do certain things, you can delay it or you can solve it or you can somehow, fix it, right? Like it will happen. And unfortunately, I know people want to claim that death won't happen. But it is certain in life. Like we will all die. Yeah, it's not the same. I guess that is kind of a bad or a negative correlate.
Yeah, like
draw,
we're
but it's
not
certain.
saying that like menopause and death are like,
No.
like that they're the same thing or even should be in the same category. But I do think that there are ways, because there are women that like sail through this transition into menopause and like really have like very few symptoms. Like those women are out there, which is fascinating, right? This is like, if you're one of those, oh my God, like tell us more. Like I want to know how it is that you
Well, it's
manage
genetics.
so well. But like maybe there's some lifestyle things. Like I really don't know the answer to that. But I do know that like some women have a way harder time with it than others, and some doctors definitely do not how do you say, like, let's say like, they don't understand, they don't want to deal with it. And like specifically primary care doctors is what I'm talking about here. So like
Right.
you're probably better off, and this is just from like my personal experience and my experience in talking with athletes who are in their like 40s and 50s, that pretty much universally we've all had to go to OBs to get this dealt with appropriately, because the PCP will just like, they have other things to deal with, and their stance is sort of like, yeah, you're getting old, like deal with it kind of thing. Like they're afraid
Right.
of, I
Right.
think they're like afraid to prescribe hormones, and they're, I don't know, like
Yeah.
they're not your best resources. So
Yeah. Absolutely
OBs.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So where do you want to start?
yeah, well, one. So I already commented, like if you're old, if you're postmenopausal in the earlier stages, this might still be an interesting conversation. I'm also going to say, even if you are, you said 35 to 53 or so, I'm actually going to say, even if you're in your 30s or late 20s, some of the stuff I wish I had known. I might have been blasé about it, only because even in my late 30s, I was like, I'm not going to have to deal with this until I'm 50, right? I thought I had the prime, because that's what we're infiltrated with, or we're bombarded with in our culture of like faster as a master, and you're still crushing it in your 40s, and you can still, you're still PRing, and that is true for some women, and that has not been my experience. So I think if I had known that I was going to start earlier, on the earlier phase of things, then I would have probably prioritized my performance a lot more in my 30s. I quite honestly. Now, could I've always done that with work and life stuff? I don't know, but I kept thinking that I was going to. I thought I have at least 10 years, right? My late 30s, and that was false. That was false expectations on my part. So, that's just another indicator that if you are in your 30s and and or you want to have children in your 40s, like that is possible for some people, some women, but it may not be the situation for everybody. So yeah, I just put that out there. Yeah, we could just start with general stuff, right? So anything before 40, right? Ending your periods before 40 is considered early. 40 to there's a bell curve, right? 40 to 54 is generally the age ranges we're talking about, but it actually varies. And they've done some statistical analyses where in Europe, the average age of menopause, so that's 1 year without your period, is 54. In North America, it's 51.4. Latin America, it's a little bit younger, 48.6. And in Asia, it's about 51 years old. So interesting. And there's probably, again, yeah, genetics, lifestyle, other factors, environmental factors potentially, because we don't really know. But that's kind of the general distribution, which means that, and I actually know some women that their mothers didn't go through menopause until almost 60. And they're functioning totally fine at 57, 58 years old. I mean, no indication that anything is changing really. Maybe a little more fatigue, right? But like periods are normal. No, like if they have done hormone testing, it's totally fine. Like in theory, they could probably still get pregnant and have children. I mean, it may not be the safest thing in the world, but that's their situation. That's definitely on the later end. So yeah, so I've often thought, when we start to see results from Ironman and 70.3, right, there's a lot of factors, there's a lot of things that are factoring in to race performances, but I think you cannot deconvolve the effects of differing stages of this transition, and again, you're right. There are some women, I don't know any really personally, that have sailed through.
Yeah, I know a few.
You know a
I,
few. That's
I do. I
amazing.
know a
Yeah.
few who are like, yeah, this is like not a big deal. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, that's, like
Okay.
cool. But
That's amazing because I have not
yeah.
yet met.
I mean,
I'm
not to
working.
say that they don't have any issues, right? I mean, of course, like everybody notices like some issues. And so what I'm talking about is that like it wasn't like really life disrupting.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right. You know
Right.
what I mean? So like, I feel like we're all like aging, or like, is this different from what you would expect from like a normal aging process? Right. So we have like normal aging, and then we have like complicated situations, or that feels like this feels worse, or this feels like it's harder than it should be. And
Right.
so that's what I mean by like kind of sail through, or like just didn't really have too many issues. And
Gotcha. Yeah.
at this point, I would put myself in that category, but it wasn't like seamless getting there, if that
Gotcha.
makes
Okay.
sense. right? Where like I had a whole bunch of like life disrupting kind of like just, it was shitty for a while, like a long time until I sort of figured it out. And now I feel like I'm in, at least my status quo currently is like, okay, I'm in a position where like I'm reasonably settled and stable for now. And maybe that changes like going forward, but like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like,
Right. Yeah, yeah. And so just I mean for the listeners out there, I'm happy to share I'm still cycling. I'm in the I would put myself in the later stages of perimenopause, but not yet menopausal. And I think from your knowledge, right? I know yeah, you're not postmenopausal, right? So you're still in this
I still
in
bleed a
between.
little bit every once
Yeah,
in a while. So like, yeah, I'm not in menopause yet.
yeah. And so yeah, it's we are learning. We are boots on the ground for our
Hmm.
personal experiences.
Are you regular, Mickey? Like, can you predict like when you're going to bleed, or does it feel more like haphazard and random?
So far, it has, my periods have shortened up. I used to be 28 days, 29 days solid. Doesn't matter if I was training 30 hours a week, 10 hours a week, if I was eating nothing or everything, right? Like my periods for the entirety of my life have been incredibly regular. By the time and it was a slow transition, I think, probably 41, 42, they started to shorten up to like 26 days, 25 days. Now they have been, unfortunately, around 21 days. Like the last couple have been 21 days, which is now getting on the point of being very annoying. Like the last 2 years was 24 days.
You're like, am I bleeding full time? Like just all the
Right,
time?
right. But I have not. I've been lucky in that I have not had the horrendous heavy periods that some women talk about. Like just bleeding through everything, right? Like, I mean, just, yeah, yeah. Like you could
Maybe
actually,
not
yeah.
yet, because when that happened to me, I was like maybe 48. So like,
Okay. Oh,
it
it's
might still
coming.
come, Mickey. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah, great. I did have fairly heavy periods, regular, but heavy on the heavy side in my early to mid 30s. And I actually did a uterine ultrasound just to make sure there's no like fibroids or, I think they're called fibroids, right? That can, I had nothing. It was just like, oh, you have just a very thick uterine lining. Like that's just what I have. So yeah, so my periods have shortened up and they're actually really light. It's almost like annoying. And that's been the experience of some of my athletes have had. I've had some athletes that have had the horrendously heavy bleeding and very irregular cycles, like nothing and then yes and then no. And they're around my age too. So yeah, it could get worse, probably, maybe. I will say, and this is where I started taking cyclical progesterone about a year ago. And so what I do that is like on day 13 or 14 of my cycle, I take it at night. It's an oral progesterone. And so, yeah, I'd love to. I know we talked about the symptom or like what symptoms might correspond to what hormone deficiencies or imbalances. And through my own hormone testing, and so I did hormone testing luckily when my early 30s, mid 30s, and then again like 40s. And while some doctors will tell you it doesn't tell you anything because it's too variable, like if you try to do hormone testing on the same day of your cycle, over time you can get more stable data over how you are varying. So it's almost like they're throwing their hands up and saying, well, we just don't understand it because it's too variable. It's like, no, no, no. Right? Like if you are tracking, this is the scientists coming out, like it is, there's still science to be done, but you can't just compare like day 20 to day 5 maybe, right? Like if you're going to do hormone testing, try to do it on the same day. And there's typical trends of how hormones vary over the cycle, right? To tell where you might be lower or higher or whatever. And throughout, my probably early 40s to now, like my progesterone is like nothing, like very, very, very low progesterone. And that usually, I think, corresponds to shorter periods, lighter periods, sleep disturbances. And so doing that, I basically take it on day 13, 14 through I try to make it to day 25, but usually I have a breakthrough bleed and then I stop the progesterone, allow the period, the bleeding to come, and then, the cycle repeats. So that's been the thing for me that has been really amazing. And it does make my sleep amazing, like really good sleep. And so, yeah, that's, now when I go through, as I transition, there might be a time to add in estrogen, but we can talk about that because we talked about that a couple weeks ago, my experience there, which then you will need to be on progesterone, I think pretty much full time, or you have to have an IUD that has the progestin to protect uterus from your uterine lining from the potential cancer, how do I want to say this? Like the potential for cancer to arise, right? From the estrogen therapy. So yeah, that's been so far.
Yeah.
What?
So if we
Yeah,
go back,
yeah,
because I feel like some things that we might want to, like, I think because like you and I have talked about this a lot, but we have not really talked about
right.
this on the podcast yet. And so like where we're going with this, like what we've learned about hormones, and is it like the big picture is like it's confusing. And like the reason that it's confusing is because it's different than some other measurements that you might take like in a blood test or something where you're looking for, like different specific measurements. And then they have like a lab value that's like, this is normal, this is high, this is low, whatever. And those like the standards haven't been, and actually I could be wrong about this when I say like there haven't been like standards that are like, here's what's normal and here's what's not. The issue is more along the lines of, our hormones are shifting so quickly all the time and in such big ways that like testing at any given point in time is going to tell you your status at that point in time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that like later tonight or tomorrow morning or or next week or whatever. Like it's not as I want to say reliable because I don't know if reliable is the word I'm looking for, but it doesn't tell us as much as we would want it to, or maybe in some other sort of disease state areas where we're looking at trying to help ourselves, like what's your iron level, right? And like you can go get that tested and you can find out if you're high or low, and then you can do something specific about it. But like with the hormones and like specifically the sex hormones, what we're looking for it doesn't necessarily matter what the exact number is, but what matters is that everything is in balance. And so if you have like whatever level of estrogen that you have, you want the progesterone, I think it's going to be lower. I think if you actually like measured it, like progesterone is lower, but it should still be like in a proportionate dance. Sort of. So like as estrogen goes up, you want progesterone to go up too. And as estrogen goes down, like if progesterone goes down too, then like you won't feel massive symptoms. And so what we're talking about when we're describing the menopausal symptoms of say like hot flashes and weight gain and disrupted sleep and brain fog and those are like pretty standard sort of symptoms that a lot of women will experience during this time. And so what we know is like, well, there's fluctuating hormones there somehow, but in what ways are they fluctuating, right? And so is it fluctuating? And so and maybe you've heard about like an estrogen dominance stage. So like if you're in a state of estrogen dominance, it doesn't necessarily mean that your actual estrogen level is too high. What that's referring to is that the estrogen is not being balanced by progesterone. And so then you're going to have some symptoms. And I actually like looked these up because I was curious and I wanted to have like a little bit of expertise like coming into this podcast. So, but if you're in an estrogen dominant state, like how would you know? And so if your period is really heavy, you're bleeding a ton. If your periods are irregular, like you never know when they're going to come, like Nikki said, hers were every 28 days, mine were too. But if yours is irregular, like that could be a sign that your progesterone is low. Breast tenderness, bloating, mood swings, anxiety, weight gain, and headaches, or like those were sort of the symptoms that came about that it would say or indicate that maybe you're in an estrogen dominant state. And I think that's like reasonably common. Like a lot of women experience that. And so like what Mickey was saying is that she then went and supplemented with progesterone. The thing is too, what you need to know is that, and this is why I like talk to your doctor, and we're not doctors, but the general rule is with progesterone is that you're only taking that in the back half of your cycle. Like you're not taking it in the first 14 days. I don't actually know why that is. Mickey, do you know why like we only do progesterone? So I know that like in a normal cycling woman, right? Like if everything's fine, that hormones are on the lower level. Both estrogen and progesterone are on the lower side in the first half of your cycle. And then in the middle, so then you ovulate. And then in the back half of your cycle, in theory or ideally, both estrogen and progesterone would go up in that case. So if you don't have enough progesterone, so maybe then symptoms are worse for a woman in estrogen dominance in the back half of the cycle. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. But like, tell me what you know about like why you would not supplement with progesterone in the first half of your cycle, like if you think you're in like an estrogen dominant state and that's something you want to try.
Well, so the doctor that that had prescribed that actually said I could. There's no reason why you can't take it. Well, if you want to have your breakthrough bleed, then you would go off of it for like, 5 days or 4 days or whatever. But in theory, like if your sleep disruption, he told me if my sleep disruptions were so bad that I just wanted to continue to take it, that there was no side effect to doing that at this point. Now, there might be, right, there's other, and like if you're trying to get pregnant, then that's a whole nother ballgame. And actually, there are situations where it can be used to enhance the possibility of contraception via like more like in women that have low progesterone and that are struggling to get pregnant, because I guess when you have really low progesterone as well, there's higher chances of miscarriage and all that sort of stuff. So, and I don't know a whole lot about that way of supplementing for that purpose. But from my understanding, and you're right, I should have looked up the curve of estrogen, progesterone, cycle. I feel like I had it memorized, right? But overall, right, that the first 14 days fairly low, and then you ovulate, and then I think both go up. I think progesterone has there's a different curve, right, of progesterone and estrogen. And so I think the recommendation to take it in the back half is just to mimic the natural cycle. And that's really the only reason. But I think for some women that are really having some estrogen dominance symptoms beyond like, the sleep disturbances, and I would say my sleep disturbances actually are pretty mild in comparison to some of the athletes that I work with who it's a real struggle. So, but I still will take it because it's been amazing, right? To have that little extra sleep aid. Because before that, I was taking a lot of melatonin, and I'm like, this is probably not healthy to take this much melatonin on a daily basis. So yeah, I can't answer specifically, but I also know that some doctors will say it's fine to take it, it's fine to take it all the time. If you want to have the breakthrough breed, then you would stop taking it. Because some women's, I guess, that if you so when you have your bleed, then your hormone levels drop again. And so I guess if you're not getting that, well, there's a couple different signs, right? You could be entering into menopause, and I think that would probably mean your estrogen's also very, very low. So yeah, but that's what I know so far of like.
Well, and I have to hear like on like in the research that I did where it's like, what are the symptoms of high progesterone? So like, I think it's not as common. Like it wouldn't be as common to be in this scenario unless you were supplementing, right? But like if you are supplementing and then you might find that you're in a high progesterone state and the symptoms of that, the common symptoms would be drowsiness, right? So you're saying it makes me sleep better. So like if you need to sleep, great. But like if you find yourself, like you're trying, you think you're in estrogen dominance, and so you're supplementing with progesterone to see if that helps to make you feel better. If you end up feeling excess drowsiness, dizziness, breast tenderness, bloating, low mood, appetite or weight changes, then that may be symptoms, or maybe like your body's trying to tell you that like, hey, you know what, that's too much progesterone. So again, this is not a case where like more is more, or even that like I'm trying to get my estrogen to go down. It's because you don't like, it's low estrogen, and that's another sort of hormonal pattern state that we can talk about. Like low estrogen is also not ideal. And so the idea, and I'll just continue to like continue to emphasize this point throughout this whole podcast, is that what we're looking for is the right balance between these hormones. And there's not like estrogen's good or estrogen's bad, or progesterone is good or progesterone's bad. It's like what we're looking for is this balance. So anyway, did you have more to say on that?
No, I did just look up the cycle of for a normal cycle of what's standard, right? And everyone is different. They're actually, when you ovulate, the estrogen does spike fairly high. It may even be higher than progesterone. And then after, on the back half of your cycle, progesterone, so the estrogen spikes and then comes back down pretty quickly. And then progesterone remains fairly high-ish. Actually, it doesn't even look like it peaks until maybe like day 21 or 22. So there is like, again, variable, and this is the reason why a lot of doctors are like, oh, we don't need to test because it's so variable. But again, if you're always testing on the same day, of course you're going to vary because you're not the same person over 5-10 years, whatever. But being able to compare to what should be more the standards can give you some insight, I think, into where you might be at. And then I also wanted to mention, did you ever do the Dutch test for any of your?
No.
Okay. That's
I know about the Dutch test, but I never actually had it done.
Yeah, I did a Dutch test too when I was in my late 30s, and it was actually I,
Tell people what the Dutch test
so
is.
oh, I'm gonna forget what that it stands for. It's essentially let me look it up. What because I can't remember.
While Mickey's doing that, we're
Yeah,
testing for cortisol, and it's a 24-hour
yeah,
test where you're looking at cortisol. And so cortisol is like we'll call it a stress hormone. And like cortisol gets a bad rap, but like cortisol gets us out of bed in the morning. So you don't want to like get rid of cortisol. It's like you just want, again, same. You want cortisol to be like in healthy ranges. You want it to spike in the morning and then like gradually decrease through the day. You don't want it to stay elevated all the time. If it does, it's showing that like your body is in a high stress state all the time. And then the other thing is, do you have it yet, or can I say one
I
more
do.
thing
No,
about this?
go ahead. Yeah, yeah. No,
So the reason that we care, and this is really important for somebody because this is going to, because later we will talk about what are some like lifestyle things that you can do to help yourself. We'll also talk about like hormone replacement and that kind of thing and like what our experience is with it. As far as if we're talking about lifestyle things, so cortisol and progesterone, they share like a precursor. I don't even know what you would call it. Like it's like a precursor hormone or a precursor something that like they both need and they're fighting for like this material in order to be made into either cortisol or progesterone. So when your stress is really high and your like life stress is out of balance and like pick reasons, there's so many reasons why that could be the case. Training might be one of them. Like you're in a high training load. So it could be physical stress. It could also be like, emotional stress or family stress or work stress or pick the thing. But when cortisol then is elevated all the time, that will lead likely to a high estrogen dominant state because your body, when it wants to produce progesterone, but like its raw materials are being made into cortisol instead. And so there are ways that like your life or the way it's going is impeding your body's ability to be in the hormonal balance that it wants to be in. So like, hopefully that was really clear. But anyway, that's why when Mickey was talking about like, as we shift now into cortisol, that's why we're talking about cortisol right now, because when cortisol goes out of whack and out of balance, it will then throw off your sex hormone balance. It'll also throw off likely your blood sugar. Like there's other things that will get thrown off when cortisol is not in like a healthy range or showing a healthy pattern. And the healthy pattern for cortisol, which is why you want to do a 24-hour test on it, is it should spike in the morning and then it should gradually come down and then remain low, and it should be at its lowest point before you go to sleep at night. And if you're not sleeping at night, like it can be, I mean, there's 100 reasons why you might not be sleeping at night, but when stress is high and your brain is going crazy, if cortisol remains high at night, then you can't sleep. And then there's a whole like host of other hormonal issues that will go along with that. So then we go to look at a Dutch test, which is 24 hours. And then we want to see what is the pattern of the cortisol throughout the day.
right. Yeah. So Dutch test is a dried urine test for comprehensive hormones. And I actually did not only the 24-hour test for cortisol, but I also did a full month test for hormone. Some doctors will say that this is not a reliable test. Other doctors swear by it. So, of course, as normal, right? Some doctors say, "Oh, blood test only," and then other practitioners will say, "No, the Dutch test is more, gives us a more realistic view because you're analyzing something daily and how it's changing daily." So I did this because I was working with a nutritionist that thought for sure I had high cortisol because I was training so much, and my cortisol was totally normal. And at the time, my hormone levels were all totally normal, so it wasn't actually that helpful. I guess it was helpful to know that like that was not the reason I was having weight gain and fatigue. It could have been that this hormone type of test was not as sensitive as if I had done a blood test to see what my progesterone was at the time. Maybe that would have shown something. Yeah. So, and there's a bunch of different, I'm looking at the website now, they've changed it quite a bit. You used to just be able to order a test and they would have a practitioner interpret it for you and give you some guidance. And now it looks like you might have to order through a practitioner, but it's essentially, a urine test. If you are having signs, so while the sex hormones, some doctors will say this is not their standard for hormone testing. Almost every practitioner and doctor would say that this is the test to get an understanding of your cortisol levels. So if you are having cortisol issues you think you might be, then doing a 24-hour test like the Dutch test is I don't want to say gold standard, but it's what most people are going to say is going to have the most reliable results because it's, again, 24 hours and cortisol varies 24 hours. So yeah, that's the Dutch test. And I probably, I don't know if I want to do it again. So, so I love testing because I think it gives us a look under the, under the hood, but I don't know if it would be totally useful at this stage. It's going to be like, yeah, your hormones are not normal. So
Yeah.
I can tell you that by how I feel.
Right. I think that's the thing. Like you can kind of look at a lot of these symptoms and be like, oh, is this so we've talked a lot about like, hormones being out of balance or estrogen being high or cortisol being high and what are the symptoms of what we feel about that. What changes over time, and like this is going to happen to all women, is that at some point your hormone levels start to drop. And like that's where perimenopause and menopause comes in. And like essentially, I'm dumbing this down, but like that's what's happening is that like your estrogen starts dropping, your progesterone starts dropping when you're like the symptoms if you're in a low estrogen state. And like, so this is just maybe is interesting to you because like at some point, maybe you want to, this is where like hormone replacement therapy might be warranted. If you're experiencing these things and then you're like, okay, I'm going to go talk to my doctor about that. So symptoms of low estrogen: hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, painful sex, low mood, brain fog, bone loss, joint pain, thinning skin. And if you think about like those are like symptoms that we just sort of associate with aging. Right. Like, and for the longest time, we've associated a lot of that with just like normal aging. The reason that our bodies are aging that way is because our estrogen levels are dropping. Right. So if you're experiencing those things, and I would say I had hot flashes and night sweats, not so much the rest of it, but hot flashes. So for me personally, just so you guys know, like where I'm at, the hot flashes that I was having were at the point where I thought like, this is disrupting my life. Right? Like I would wake up 12 times. I would have like 12 hot flashes a night where I would just be waking up constantly. And I got to the point because then for a while, then it's like, okay, well, how do I deal with that? Like there were times where I would get really mad because like I like my sleep and I want to sleep. And so then like I'd wake up in the middle of the night and be mad because I was having a hot flash and I was awake. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'm going to use my mindset tools, right? I'm going to use the tools that I know of like mindset and breathing and like see if I can investigate. So I decided this is my, I'm going to get curious about my hot flashes. Like I'll get curious. And so I like just really pay attention. These are things you learn in meditation. And by the way, it sounds like I'm making fun of this and like, in a way I sort of am in this case, but like that whole getting curious about body symptoms has been something that has been really good for me in other areas. I would just say like in this area, it did not cure my hot flashes, but I would be like, okay, like, let me just pay attention. Like, where's that coming from? What does it feel like? And the thing that I found really interesting in my like curiosity about my nighttime hot flashes, a pattern that I recognize and realize is that I would actually wake up probably 20 seconds before the hot flash would actually come. So when I was waking up, it was not being hot that woke me up. It was something else about the hot flash that woke me up because I would wake up and I would be like, why am I awake? And then like within 20 seconds or so, maybe 15, I would feel just like this overwhelming flush through my whole body. My whole body would get really hot. And then I would be like, let me just lay here and just pay attention to that feeling like, oh, that's interesting, and I'm like really trying to not get mad. The benefit of not getting mad, by the way, and like and being curious and doing it the way I did it was that I was able then to fall asleep again really quickly. Right. But then like an hour later, I would wake up and then my whole body would flush and flash and I'd be really hot and kick off the covers. And then I would not get mad and I'd fall back asleep. And so even me not getting mad about it, like it still, I was waking up so often. And the daytime ones, like I still had them, but I'd say like they didn't bother me like quite as much. But that was the thing. And I did have night sweats sometimes too. Like there were times where I would wake up and my sheets would just be wet, really gross. And so that was the thing that sent me to actually like make an appointment with my doctor. I was like, and this was just, it wasn't too long ago. So like, just so people know, like, I think it was in like June of this year is when I went in. And, but interesting. So I'll share the whole story just so that, like, just don't bother with your GP. So I called, I just kind of thought that by now, like, this is really obvious and easy, right? Like, I've had some friends that have said like they tried hormone replacement therapy, and like it was life changing. They said it was really great. They appreciated how it made them feel. And so ask your doctor about it. So I just went through my normal GP. And I mean, I'm not kidding, Nikki. He quoted the Women's Health Initiative study, like from 2000 or whatever, and told me that he was uncomfortable providing hormones for women and that I needed to talk to my OB about that. And like, okay, so like that's fine. I wish I would have known that ahead of time, because then I wouldn't have wasted 2 weeks like waiting for an appointment with him before I could even then make an appointment with the OB and then wait another 2 weeks, so like what that all that really did was extend the amount of time until I could get like decent care. But I knew about the Women's Health Initiative. Like I knew how and why that study had been debunked. And we're not going to go into all that today because there's other podcasts that have like done a really good job about that. But I did find it interesting. And it's interesting in like human psychology to know that like, here's a doctor. And so there was like something that you heard about hormone replacement therapy 25 years ago. And it was the first thing you heard. And then that has determined your stance on it for decades going forward, when like much of that has been debunked. And there are people that know more that have studied it more recently and going like, I think like you're wrong about that. Anyway, so when I went to see my OB, she was amazing and she fully understood, and did not need me. I didn't have to go in there and like rationalize a whole bunch and like, let me tell you like, and because I was basically like, look, I don't know if like hormone replacement therapy is right for me. I've had some friends that have tried it and said that it was great for them. I knew I was sort of afraid of it because I hated birth control pills so much. Like I was on birth control at times in my 20s and 30s, and I absolutely hated the way that it made me feel. Like I was an emotional wreck. I didn't like it. And so in my mind, I equated like birth control hormones with hormone replacement hormones. And it made me think like, I don't want to do that because I hated birth control pills so much. But I brought that up with my OB and she was like, no, it's like not the same at all. It's so much less of a dose. Like it's just a really minuscule dose of estrogen that we're going to give you. And basically in her mind, there was really like no harm, no foul in trying it. She goes, you can try. And then like, if you don't like it, then you can stop and it shouldn't be an issue. And so basically what she gave me patches. So they're just like literally little stickers. I guess there's some that you can wear and just change out once a week. And she told me that there was another one that you change out twice a week. I specifically asked for the twice a week one, mostly thinking that like I swim a lot, right? So I didn't like trust a sticker to stay on my body for an entire week. And so in my mind, I thought if I change it out every 3 or 4 days, like that seems like it might be better for me. But I will tell you that like the one that I tried, like after 4 days, I have to peel that sticker off, right? And what's interesting is that if I've sort of forgotten, which has happened a little bit, like where I've gone into like the 5th day or something, I will be reminded by a hot flash.
Interesting.
Right. Like it's really fun. So like almost immediately then my experience in putting the little patch on was that within a day, my hot flashes like almost disappeared. Like I haven't had one in the middle of the night. Maybe like once or twice a week, I'll get one in the middle of the night. But like, I mean, down from 12 a day, I mean, it's nothing, it's fine. And so, but I will be reminded, like, if I went to the 4th day or whatever and forgot to change it out, then I'll have a hot flash and be like, oh, that's right. And, I need to switch that out. So yeah, so I've only been on it. What is it? It's end of September. So I guess I'm going on my like 4th month of being on replacement estrogen, and I would not trade it. Right. Like, so for me, like this was a really good thing. I feel like I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty regulated. I'm pretty like, but then the other thing that I will share, just so you know, is that because we talked about the estrogen progesterone balance before. So I think I'm like it was probably 2.5 years ago now. And Mickey said how like she didn't have like this issue with like tons and tons of bleeding. I did. And I know a lot of other people have. And so if you find yourself in this category, like this part will make your ears pop up or perk. There was a time that I went through, and I just remember that it was definitely in May because it was right around Mother's Day, because I remember my family like wanting to take me out to dinner for Mother's Day. And I was like so scared to go out because I was bleeding, like level of bleeding that I was experiencing made me literally not want to leave the house. It was like golf ball sized clots. Like I couldn't, there was like no tampon that was going to cover it. There was no period or no pad that was going to cover it. In my bathroom, I'm like, is somebody being murdered in my I was so bad. I was just never experienced anything like it. And so when I called my doctor on that, and they actually got me in right away, if you call your doctor and you say that like you're bleeding so excessively like that, like they will find an emergency appointment for you that afternoon, or at least
Sure.
my doctor did. She was like,
Sure.
come in this afternoon. But that also like completely freaked me out because they were going to do like a biopsy to see if I had uterine cancer. Right. So then I'm like a complete disaster. Right. Cause I'm like, oh my God, I have uterine cancer. And I said, like, I'm losing my mind.
Yeah.
But I went in and I had like a uterine biopsy done, and like thankfully like that came out negative. Interestingly, what she found. So then you go like, well, then what was it? Like, I literally have no idea, and I don't know like why this happens. But I'm going to share my story in case like it's happening to you too, so you know like you're not alone. Like our bodies just do wacky things sometimes when hormones go out of whack. But apparently my uterus, like she measured my uterus, and like this is a woman that it was the same doctor that gave me an IUD after my daughter was born. So I used an IUD for birth control for a long period of time after my daughter was born, and I loved it. Like the IUD was magic for me. Like I thought it was really good. I mean, it wasn't. I definitely had like swings, and we can talk about all of that. But like it lowered the amount of bleeding I had every month, which I like just appreciated till no end. And so there were some of the mood swing things I would be like, I'll take that, I'll trade that for like the heavy bleeding, because the heavy bleeding was like just not good in so many ways. So anyway, this woman had, I guess she had like a measurement of my uterus, like how big it was. And when she compared that, when I was having like this massive, because it wasn't fibroids, like I thought it was fibroids, but it wasn't fibroids. It was just something like my uterus expanded to like 3 times its normal size. It was almost like I was pregnant, like giant uterus.
Wow.
Like what? Yeah, I had no idea. Um, and so maybe that, I don't know if like that's why there was so much blood or what, but like she then suggested that I try um, to put the IUD, to give myself a new IUD. So like I didn't need it at that time for birth control, but she's like, well, we wouldn't be using it for birth control. We'd be using it to like control bleeding and for like the other benefits that you have. Um, I was like, I was open to trying it because it had worked before. And she put the IUD in, and I shit you not, within 3 days, like I felt like I'm regulated, everything is fine, like this is a miracle. And like I just went through all of that heavy bleeding thinking I had cancer, and like all the like I was such a mess for several weeks. And then she literally like put that little IUD in, and like poof, everything was fine. And then she told me, she said, you might just, because like these hormones are going to be good for like 5 or 7 years. And I think at the time I was like 48, maybe I just turned 49. I think I just turned 49. And she said, this may just take you straight through menopause, and you may not even know, because like when your bleeding is so low, right? Like she goes, you might go through and actually like end up in menopause while while you have this IUD, and you won't even know. I'm like, that's great. I'm
Yeah.
happy. That perfect. Like I will not complain about that. But I will say that like I notice a little bit of spotting randomly still, all the, I want to say all the time, but commonly enough, that tells me that like I'm at least a year away. Like last week I was spotting. So like I'm at least a year away from actually being in menopause. And so when my doctor put me on the HRT, for me personally, it's only estrogen in this patch, because she was saying the IUD is providing the progesterone that you want to balance it out. And the reason you're balancing that out is because like we reminded you in the beginning, you want your hormones in balance, but also it's protective against uterine cancer. I think it's uterine cancer. I don't know. It's protective against
Yeah.
some kind of cancer. But interestingly, my doctor, my OB, she was like very pro HRT. Probably not for everyone. I mean, I'm sure that there would be like, here are stances where like it's not right for you. But like in my case, and in counseling me, because like I said, I just have questions. I want to talk to somebody who knows about this stuff. So like, tell me what your thoughts are. She had no problem prescribing it. And she really felt like there were for someone like me, not very many downsides. She said that like potentially a risk of stroke would be a potential thing, but then she said that risk is lower with the patch versus like an oral estrogen. So that's why she went with the patch instead of like the oral estrogen. And then, but she talked about how it would be protective for like a lot of other things, for like, your bone mineral density. And she said that there's like ongoing studies about like neuroprotective. So it's like estrogen protecting your brain. And she said they're still studying this. She goes, my gut feeling is that when that data comes out, it's going to indicate that there's neuroprotective properties of like being on HRT. And so, and then interestingly, what she did for me was she scheduled a bone density test because she's like, let's just get a baseline. So like we know where you're at right now, like when you start this HRT, and then we'll know if it's, what's happening with your bone mineral density. And I did that like a month ago and I got the results back, and like my bone mineral density is like perfect. Like it's not negative. Like it's the same as like a 30-year-old's, right? Which is like super, like really good to know. Like I'm not, but HRT, if you do have low bone mineral density, going on HRT is about, I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to speak out of turns like like take Tylenol, don't take Tylenol, but like
God. I think I'll take some Tylenol tonight.
but here's the thing, like I was in pharmaceutical sales and like this is a decade ago, and I was selling a drug for osteoporosis, and so I do have like a baseline knowledge of bone mineral density and osteoporosis that is probably above and beyond like your average public citizen. And at the time, the drug that I was selling was like an alternative to HRT, and it was at the time, and so like it's crazy now because I look back, I'm like, oh my God, like I can't believe I was trying to get doctors to like give women this drug, right? Because like the drug that I was selling, I was like 30 at the time that I'm selling it, right? So I have no idea like what hot flashes are like or any of it, right? But like my drug was shown to increase hot flashes, and like I'm telling the doctors, but like it's minor, doc, like don't, you know what I mean? Like you still choose this because of like the benefits to the bone, and you can just like, like tell, like help your patients understand that like it's no big deal and it's worth it to have the hot flashes because for the bone mineral density, blah blah blah. But one of the drugs we were competing directly against was HRT. And so like my job as the sales rep was to go in and talk to the doctor about the dangers of HRT and why you wanted to choose my drug instead of HRT. So even though HRT is shown to like lower the incidence of hot flashes and preserve bone mineral density and like all these good things that HRT did, my job was to go in and make the doctor see that like, oh, well, there's danger, like just plant seeds of the danger there. But, my drug wasn't going to have those like negative effects, or like it wasn't going to cause cancer and blah blah blah, like. And so now I look back, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know, I'm apologizing, I made a mistake. But like, so HRT at the time, like I knew that the data on preserving bone mineral density for HRT was better than the data that the drug I was trying to promote, right? So like HRT really does a good job of preserving bone mineral density, and it reduces hot flashes and night sweats and blah, blah, blah. So that's been my experience. But then now we'll counter that because Mickey, you had an experience too,
Well,
right? So like, let's
well,
share,
yeah.
let's share the whole story.
I wanted to just comment on your comment about like when your doctor, the first doctor you saw, your general, and the Women's Health Initiative, right, which really damaged hormone replacement therapy, hormones. I think it gave it an entire and again, there's a whole podcast that would talk about this. They're more informed than Michelle and I, but just even my own mother, right, growing up, it was like hormones are bad. And I have an athlete right now that is postmenopausal, and when I asked her about what she was doing for bone mineral density and or if she was postmenopausal, all this stuff, and she went through fair on the earlier side, but her comment to me was like, oh no, hormones are bad. And it was shocking to me that she's not that much older than I am, but the amount of what that has done to our society, our culture about, I mean, hormones are literally what make us like it gives us our vitality and our I mean, if you want to get down to the details, like it gives us our performance edge, right? It gives us our cognitive edge. It gives us, yeah, not even just talking about reproductive, whether that's important to you or not, right? But it literally determines everything in life. And so yeah, and of course, not being a doctor but being a scientist, like I am very open to it, and that's been my stance for a long, long time. Is like, let's actually look at the data, let's assess risks, because if there are risks, then we have to weigh them against the benefits. So yeah, I just have to, and it's shocking to me that a doctor would tell you that, right? Like, but maybe not, because in my mind, not all doctors are scientists, right? They get into what they want to do, and that's where they stay. They're not interested in learning more or different or seeing things different. So yeah,
Some,
so yeah,
some.
some, not all, yes. And I've seen a variety. And right now I have one that's very good. And so I'm happy to have found her because I've heard horror stories. And I've had other
Yeah.
doctors in the past, so yes, I will share my experience. So, and I'll preface this by saying, so when I worked up the courage to talk to my mother about when she went through menopause, because that's not talked about in our family, right? No health stuff, right? No, nothing. And I always assumed that she went through like, 52, 53, 54. I don't know, because she had my sister at 40, 41, 41, almost 41, or maybe 42. I can't remember. But on the older side, now there's certainly women that have children older, at more advanced age. But I just assumed that meant that she was, very, you know, wasn't a problem, right? Until 50s. Well, when I did work up the courage to ask, like, oh, so do you remember when you went through menopause? She was like, yeah, I think like 46. And I was like, oh shit. And I was probably like 42, 43. I'm like, oh God, that's what the problem is. Because for about 50% of women, there's a genetic component. If your mother went through younger, especially if you went through younger, then if your mother went through younger, then you are more likely to go through at a younger age. And so, um, yeah, so when I started to have things like huge, like massive fatigue, like fatigue to the point where it would, I mean, what are they, like bone deep fatigue, right? Like I'd done Ironman cycles, I'd done ultra, like nothing compared to the fatigue that I was experiencing in my early 40s, and still kind of, I've just, it's just, it is part of what I am now, right? Like it is, I think I've accommodated the level of fatigue, but it was shocking, and I wasn't training at the same amount. And so I went in, I did sleep tests, I did tons of blood work. At the time, the doctor I was seeing did not recommend any hormone testing because it wasn't that, right? It was just cortisol. I think I don't even think I did a Dutch test. Maybe I did a blood test for cortisol. It was normal. It was totally normal. And weight gain, extreme weight gain. No real changes in period though early on, but huge fatigue. Then my cycle started to shorten up. I'm trying to think of all the other. My side effects have not been the standard of like when you go and you talk about like, oh, you're having hot flashes. And like, no, I've actually never. I had a hot flash. I think I had night sweats when I was finishing my PhD, which we've talked about. I'm sure I had high cortisol when I was finishing my PhD, a ton of stress in my late 20s. But I don't have the night sweats, the hot flashes yet. Although asking my mother, she did not either. And so there might be, so yeah, again, about 75%. It's very common to have those side effects. And they can be, yeah, life altering, right? Like it sounds horrible. And I'm someone that I run hot all the time. So having that additional, like, it sounds terrible. So I don't know. Knock on wood, I have not had that yet. But yeah, just low energy, low fatigue, very, a lot of fatigue. And so I sought out one of the online, and I don't mind sharing this, and I'm not sponsored, I don't get any breaks, but I went through an online company called Joy, JOI, and they do blood work to make sure your hormone levels are not totally crazy out of whack, and they do a whole full health assessment. It was a doctor, it was a registered nurse that I talked to. This time last year, and that's when I started the progesterone on the back half of my cycle. And full disclosure, they recommended I started on a very low dose of testosterone. And since I was not racing, I decided to try it. Um, I was on it for about 5 or 6 months, and it was just too expensive, and I wasn't seeing the benefits that were real promised. Like they were like, this is going to revolutionize like your mood and your energy and your muscle mass, and I didn't really see that. And I didn't have any side effects. It might have been that maybe my testosterone, total testosterone, and my free testosterone was like nothing. Like no, I have like none, right? Which was shocking because when I did hormone testing in my 30s, it was slightly above average. And my sisters have had hormone testing younger, and theirs were also above average. So I think that's a genetic, like how we operate, which probably contributed to some of my athletic advantage, my ability to put on muscle mass very quickly. So some real positives that I had. But as I transitioned into perimenopause, it is like tanked. And that's a whole nother ballgame. So like it is banned, right? Like if I were to race and get tested, like and for me at this point, I'm not interested in racing. So it was something
Mhm.
that I was willing to try at least. And so women that
I
are
think
out
it's
there that,
interesting. Can we just like pause for a second? I think it's interesting that testosterone is, I mean, I'm not saying it's bad that testosterone's banned, but like obviously testosterone's banned. But estrogen isn't. And I don't know that estrogen is necessarily a performance enhancement, right? But like, I mean, if I don't know, and I don't want this to come across as like Michelle was advocating for testosterone to like be not be illegal. Like that's not what I'm saying, but like, but there are benefits to women, right? To like go on estrogen that like, and it makes you just feel sort of like more like yourself. So while it's not, I don't think there's necessarily a performance advantage like above and beyond like what you would normally be able to do when you were on estrogen. But I think for sure when estrogen like tanks and is in the gutter, like it's reasonable to expect that your performance would be worse, right? Like we're,
Yeah.
you know, like
Yeah.
that your performance is going to go down. And so it's interesting that for women, we're okay with that. But like for men, because it can also happen that like men, your testosterone is in the gutter, right? And so even in the case where like they would go to their doctor, and I think that this is likely happening a lot in the male fields in like, you know, 50 to 54, 55, 59. Like I bet a lot of those guys are on testosterone and justifying it in their own minds that like, well, my testosterone's in the gutter and I'm just like trying to get myself back to baseline. Like I'm not trying to do anything that's like I'm not trying to cheat. I'm not trying to, you
Right.
know,
Right.
do anything untoward. Like I just want to feel normal and I want to feel good and I want to feel peppy. And the testosterone when I take it allows me to feel more like I did when I was younger and I like it. And so I'm gonna, you know, it's more like a lifestyle. Like they just feel better when
Right.
they take it. Of course
Yeah.
they do. And then a sort of a side effect of that is like, oh, you might perform better too. And like I just think that it's an interesting difference between men and women that way. Cause I actually wondered, I'm like, when I put my patch on and I'm like, I'm pretty sure this would be illegal if it was testosterone, but it's not, it's estrogen. So like it shouldn't be.
Right.
But I would also bet that I'm likely, I mean, my performance is still going downhill. Like I'm still, my performance is doing, if there's like an age graded thing for like, how much slower should you get as you get older? Like I'm doing that. But I
Same.
would also
Same.
say that like I'm probably doing better with the patch than I would be if I wasn't
Yeah.
wearing the patch, right? You
Well,
know what I mean? And so, but that's not illegal. So like I don't
right.
know. We're not here to like debate about like
Debate.
drugs
Well,
and illegal drugs, but fascinating, right?
it is fascinating, and it's a whole gray area. And I think we've probably talked offline about this. When and when I was getting regular hormone testing, and all when I was taking, and I even have the dose of the testosterone they recommended, and my testosterone was always in normal levels. So there was no like, if you are going to go by blood testing, right, and by now I know you can test for the synthetics and whatever, but just for if you're going to just go with levels, like it just brought me up to a normal level, and so
Mm-hmm.
is that so? And I totally agree, right? I think HRT, when we're in the stage of perimenopause, menopause, and we're just trying to get back to a like, well, what's normal, right? I mean, so do we accept that women after 60 like should have no hormones, and that's what we're gonna accept as
Yeah.
normal, right? Is that optimal? Like, I don't think so. But we've talked about this a ton on the podcast. Like when your baseline health is suffering, you cannot perform. And so when women are in this stage, and men too, that get for whatever reason, genetics or lifestyle, whatever, have low testosterone, and your baseline health is not good, like yeah, you're not gonna be able to progress, perform, maybe even do the activities that you used to do. And so is it in performance enhancing to take HRT at any level, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone? Probably, right? Like, I mean, you're supplementing from what is your normal, natural, right? Like levels. And so it's a total gray area. And I have thoughts, right? Like, yes, testosterone, if used in sufficiently high levels, it can be performance enhancing. But I think the way I was taking it, and the way a lot of women are taking it, is not that. And and it is less research because there's a stigma around it that women don't need testosterone, which is bullshit. Our ovaries produce testosterone. We produce testosterone at some points, in some points of even a normal cycle, woman's cycle, at higher levels than estrogen and progesterone. Then to say we don't need it is, like not looking at the science. In addition to the fact that for men with osteoporosis, osteopenia, osteoporosis, the number one treatment is testosterone. And what do we do for women? We say, well, it's estrogen. Now there is research that says estrogen is protective against bone loss and retaining your bone mineral density. But my gut feeling is that if it's working for men, it would work for women also. And are the cancer risks there with testosterone for women? And I don't think they are, at least not yet proven. And so obviously probably are not going to see that research coming out of the United States anytime, probably in our lifetime, but hopefully other countries
Probably
will
not.
take up the torch and continue women's health to investigate the whole range, the whole gamut of like what works, what's the risks, what's the benefits. So so I just put that out there, in terms of what, and so testosterone for me was not this magic thing, and it was expensive, and so I just decided I'm not going to continue on. I continued on with the progesterone because I could see the benefits, and yeah. So then when I went into my gynecologist just a couple months ago, and I was telling her about my experiences and how testosterone maybe did help a little bit with my moods, maybe a little bit with the fatigue, but it was so expensive. And she's like, "Well, let's just try estrogen," because she said I'm perimenopausal, it's working for me. And I said, "Okay, sure, let's try it." And so she gave same patch, and I'm gonna blank on the dosage because even the patches, even though all of them are, well, not, I don't want to say all of them, but like from what I understand, most of them are low doses in comparison to the oral. The mechanism, right, is a slower absorption, so it tends to have less risk associated with it. And so I think I was on the second to lowest dose, and I think we compared last week, and I don't remember. Anyways, so I tried it, and
Mine
this
is
was my
just for the record, mine
yeah.
is 0.1 milligram a day,
Okay,
like 0.1. So that, I mean, that seems like pretty darn low,
it's pretty
but
low.
I don't know.
Mine was like 0.00375, and there's one even lower than that. So very, very low dose. So this is fascinating because I still measure HRV with the HRV app, and I don't have my Aura ring anymore. I do wear the Garmin watch at night, but I don't think it's as accurate, in my opinion. Immediately, I was waking up, so my HRV started to tank. My heart rate, even so I always take my HRV in the morning, same seated position, do the routine, so we've talked about HRV and how it can vary throughout the day, but I'm always taking it at the same time, the same way, so I can tell like when things are off. HRV was tanking, resting heart rate was like 5 to 6 to 8 beats higher on average. And this is no change in exercise, no change in diet, no change in hydration, not sick. This was like fascinating to me. And it was like several days of this. And I'm like, what's going on? Like maybe I am coming down with something. And then I started noticing, like, I think my blood pressure's up, right? Like I started noticing fluid retention. I started noticing so that was like a week and a half of this stuff. I'm like, man, maybe I'm not eating well. Maybe I'm eating too much salt, right? Like I'm going through all the like, what could I be doing? And it's taking me a moment, right? So the second week, I started to have the most intense, I won't even call it tenderness. I will call it pain, like pain. I mean, barely could put a bra on. I mean, it was so intense, like far more intense than I've ever experienced in my entire life. And I was like, oh my God, finally, that's when the bells were like, oh,
Yeah,
it's
that, yeah.
the patch. And I started going down the medical journals, this and that. Of course, there's very little about HRV, heart rate, hormone replacement, this kind of stuff, because probably there's not many people, but we're probably tracking it, right? But and maybe some other athletes are, but maybe you're not having these experiences. I don't know. So I did see one study. So I have very dense breast tissue, and I don't know my genetic risk for breast cancer. On my mom's side, I don't. There's not a lot of occurrences, so that's good. My father's side, though, does have some pretty serious breast cancer, and it's a little bit removed. It's my grandfather's twin sister had 2 rounds of pretty severe breast cancer, and her daughter had breast cancer very young, like 45. So there was a study, I think it was Stanford or UCLA, and it was a big data analysis of like 20 years of data. Did note that, so with these big, and this will be just an aside about these big back studies where they're looking at the data analysis from 20 years, 15 years, it's less controlled, right? So we don't know what their baseline diet was. We don't know what their cardiovascular health was. There's a lot of unknowns with these types of database studies. However, you can still learn some risk factors, in my opinion, from these bigger studies, because the controlled studies are very difficult, right? You have to control everything. And so the number of people you can get to do these studies is challenging, and then tracking them for
And
like
probably
20
somewhat
years.
inhumane if we're like, does this give
Right,
you cancer?
right,
Let's find out.
right, right. Let's find out.
There's standards on that. They're like, we're not
Right.
actually going to like have
Yeah.
a group, a cohort that we're going to see
Right.
if that works.
Right. So what the study did note, though, was that there was a 33% chance increased prevalence of breast cancer within women that started HRT and reported extreme breast tenderness initially. And that was like, since I don't know my
Mm-hmm.
risks yet, I'm going to do the genetic testing. It was pretty awful. It was not a good experience, which made me think I actually am not, and I'm not having the low estrogen symptoms, right? Other than, my fatigue. And she's like, well, maybe estrogen can help with your mood and fatigue, right? And it's generally, I mean, yes, it definitely could. If you're getting better sleep, right, then it can help with your mood. But sleep right now is not terrible. I mean, it's okay. It's not as good as it was in my 20s and 30s, but it's not like what some of my athletes are experiencing, which is horrendous sleep. So I decided to stop. I took the patch off, and within 3 or 4 days, no breast tenderness. My HRV recovered. My resting heart rate went back down. I didn't feel like I was having high blood pressure. And it was like, wow, that's incredible, right? It's incredible how when you do something that you're not ready for, right? And so I'm not discounting that estrogen won't be in my future, but I think one, I need to investigate my risk factors, and two, I'm gonna wait a little bit longer to go down that route because
Yeah, yeah, and for sure.
yeah,
And it's like, and the reason why I think it's important to share like both of our stories is because like this is the whole thing about like why it's hard to have a conversation around hormones and hormone replacement therapy. And it's because like the experiences that women individually have can vary so much, like from woman to woman. And uh it's really hard to be like just generalize and be like this is what you can expect. It's like, well, it's different for all people. And so like, is HRT good or bad? Like, I mean, that's a really nuanced answer. Like for some women it can be really really good, and for others like not necessarily. So if you're not it I mean, it just sort of makes sense that like, well, if you're in a low estrogen state, then like replacing some estrogen, like maybe that helps. Great. If you're not in a low estrogen state and you take excess estrogen, well, like, I don't know, maybe what happens to you is what happened to Mickey. And like, well, that you definitely don't want that. So there's no like, I just feel like the recommendations are so nuanced. But I also feel like just about every woman that I have had a one-on-one conversation with who is between like at least 45, um, like 45 to 50-ish, like they're all really open and like really happy to talk about this stuff. And like, they'll share the story and be like, this is what happened to me. And the amount of times that I've heard from those women that they go to their doctor and their doctor kind of rolls their eyes and is just like, oh, like, but I think it's probably like, if you put yourself in the position of the doctor, he's seeing patients all day long, right? And it's just
yeah.
like, this probably is, it feels like some sort of enigma. Like, I don't know how to fix that. And so like, let's shift gears a little bit and say, so we talked about sort of hormone replacement therapy and how in some cases it can be great, in some cases it's not. If you are wondering about it, go to your doctor, ask, maybe you try. If you have a good experience, stay on it. If you don't, then don't. But we can also look into sort of like lifestyle factors that, and we'll just touch on this quickly because we've already been going for like a long
Yeah.
time.
We
We
might
can
have
talk
to
about
do
this all day. Maybe we
the
need to do that on another. But the thing is, like, I feel like we can do pretty quickly on the lifestyle factors because they're literally like the same things that we've been talking about for like how to make sure that you're absorbing your training. Like, they're pretty much the same, which can be really frustrating because like we want like the magic pill, right? Like we want the thing that's really easy. But what we talked about in the beginning was it like, or what we were alluding to with like the cortisol and the stress, and like how when one thing in your body gets out of whack, and like pick the thing, and in this, like when stress is high, and like stress can be high because you're not sleeping, or you're not sleeping because stress is high, right? And it can be because like you have this like insane lifestyle thing that is like in your face, and it could be your boss at work, and it's something that you feel like you can't change, or it's a family member, or it's you're in the stage of life where like you're dealing with your parents who have dementia and you're still raising your teenagers who are doing it, and it's just like there's just a lot for us at this time. And so as we say, like these basic lifestyle factors, look, I know it's all like so much easier said than done. Like just get more sleep. Like I've had people tell me like, if anyone tells me to like, all they need to do is breathe like one more time, I'm going to smack them in the face. And it's like, and if that's your reaction to somebody telling you to breathe, like you're clearly so high strung that like you're in a state where like any little thing is going to set you off. like you're likely in a situation where internally everything is haywire, right? Like where you're not likely going to be like in a hormonal balance that is going to be like kumbaya and beneficial for you, where you're going to have perfect sleep and like be able to think clearly. And so I remember before all of this, so like in my early 40s, really feeling like so much of this stuff, because the lifestyle stuff is not any sort of quick fix. It's all long term, like it's months in the making, versus like you put on an estrogen patch and you don't need it. You'll know within a couple days, right? Like you'll know. But like if you start sleeping well and eating right, like it still might be another month or two before you notice it, like, oh, I feel so much better. And that can feel really frustrating and overwhelming, especially if you're the type of person that's like, hurry up and fix my problem right now. And like I remember like that impatience, like I absolutely had that. And it was like that state that was lending itself, or that was like putting me in the hormonal chaos that I was in. But like because I was in the chaos, I was like
it was a
I
feedback
couldn't
that was
hear
like,
that advice because it was like
right.
all too much. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's like I feel that as we get into this age range, hormonal state, as we get into this hormonal state, because it's not age dependent, it really isn't. And I literally just had someone tell me, well, because they are experiencing faster as a master, and my gut feeling is, and no one wants to talk about it when they have these big race PRs, and like, so yeah, you might be 48, maybe you're 43. What's your hormonal status, right? Like your 43 is not the same as my 43. That's just, that's something I've had to accept. Um, and I'm, there are some women that start this struggle even younger than I did, right? And so I have to stop saying age related area, right? And I also want to say this. I've also been told by someone who is about my age, who I don't think is even remotely close to going through this transition. And they said to me, well, you're look at it this way. You'll have it all figured out and you'll be crushing, right? And that's such a, I mean, I'm glad you're laughing, right? Because it shows so much ignorance, right? Like that is an ignorant statement. I mean, once you go through, right, there's no figure, I mean, there's acceptance of what's happening and where you're at. And there is some, like, and we mitigate it. But there is no, again, like going back, there's no solving this. There's no like, I'm going to find some magic fix and become like, I'm going to get back to being as fast as when I was 35. Like that's not how this works, right? And there is a lot of evidence that suggests that the earlier you go through, the more adverse health effects you have down the line from some of these, either bone loss. We even talk about the cardiovascular, the lung capacity decreases that happen through menopause, perimenopause, and menopause, which is huge for performance if you're an endurance athlete. I'm going off again. We're going back to lifestyle, so I'll go back on that track. But it's like this stage of hormone chaos. It just becomes even more important to double down on baseline health, baseline mental health and physical health, because it's like if your hormones are not working with you, right, and they're becoming suboptimal, right? I hate the optimal, whatever. They are in a state of decline, right? Then it becomes even more important to eat well, to manage your stress levels, to manage your cortisol levels, and like Michelle said, you've said, like, not all experiences are going to be the same. And so you have to become your own doctor in some ways. And I'm not advocating that you actually do that, because there's some people that are doing that. They think they know more than doctors. However, you have to become the scientist, right? Tracking yourself and tracking your moods and your feelings and what you're eating and your energy levels. And so yeah, it is probably very
It
annoying.
comes back to that thing we were talking about before, like awareness, like be aware.
Awareness.
Yeah.
So what are your tips for lifestyle?
Okay, so I have
I have a few.
like
Okay,
top
go ahead.
5 things, right? Like top 5 things that you can do. And number 1, I will not say lower your stress, because in a lot of cases that is not possible to do, right? Like a lot of times, like the sources of stress that are coming at us are not within our control. So number 1 is learn to better manage the stress that is coming at you, right? Like have those lifestyle practices like in place. And it's called a practice because it's a thing that you need to do frequently and a lot, right? So like you, in order to like manage stress well, in theory, you have lots of opportunities to practice. So like there's a benefit. It's probably coming at you all the time. But being aware of like, oh, that's the kind of thing that like triggers me and sends me off. And like, I know that that's stressful for me. And like different things will be like that for different people. But really like getting yourself outside. I mean, the best things that we can do is get outside, exercise with friends, find ways to laugh, dance, like find joy in places. It's amazing the degree to which that can help versus like being by yourself, doom scrolling at 3 a.m. I mean, that's like completely opposite states, right? So like, I just find so easier exercise. So knowing that like hard exercise is going to at least temporarily increase stress. We've done tons of podcasts on that. So you can go, I won't reiterate all that right now, but easy exercise outside with friends is literally like one of the best things you can do as far as like managing stress. Of course, we've done like whole podcasts on learning how to breathe, like breathing low and slow and the indicators of that sends to your brain. So learning to say no. I think there's a lot of women who have learned to like that we need to take care of everything. And if I don't do it, who will? And that we like feel this sense of responsibility to take on all the projects and do all the things and like do it all right. And I will tell you, if you're somebody who doesn't really know how to say no, or you rarely say no, start practicing that and start with like something that feels easy to say no to and note how empowering it is. Right? When you like stand up for yourself and say like, I would love to do that fundraiser for that school, but like, I don't have time right now. And I'm sorry that I can't. Maybe next year I'll be in a better place. Maybe you won't. But when you lower your, or when you improve the way that you're managing stress or find ways to lower it, your body will do better at managing its hormones internally, right? So like what we're trying to do with the Learn to Manage Stress Better is like set our bodies up. And this is a core belief that I have, that like our bodies are trying all the time to do like what's right in that moment, or like they're trying to heal themselves. They're trying to keep things in balance. And, you know, and I'm sure there's times where it's like, yeah, we didn't have any control over that and something, you know, went wacky with it. But in a lot of cases, your body's really trying. And then our job is to like, how do I create an environment that allows my body to do what it wants to do? And so if your body's still trying to make hormones and it's trying to keep them in balance, but your cortisol is like through the roof, and so therefore it can't make the progesterone, right? Like if you can find a way to like lower the cortisol, then it'll go back to like making the progesterone and putting you back in balance. So keeping that in mind, that like that's what you're trying to do, is like create this environment where your body doesn't have to work so hard to keep you in a good hormonal balance. Number 2, protect your sleep like it's gold. Like it's just, and we've done again a whole podcast on this, but it's like poor sleep's going to throw off like your cortisol, your estrogen, your progesterone, your insulin. Like it just throws everything off. You know, so that's when your body's doing all of its repairs. It's like you want your body to perform well, but then you're like, I'm only going to sleep 3 hours or 4 hours, or you're going to stay up late and watch the Netflix thing. Or like, I realize that a lot of times it doesn't feel like a choice when you're not sleeping well. And I remember that like when I wasn't sleeping well, where I didn't feel like a choice. But I will say that the vast majority of the changes that I've made that have helped me sleep better now have been choices. The choice isn't like in the moment at 11 p.m. That's not when the choice is. The choice is like in the morning, like how are you managing? In the afternoon, how are you managing? In the evening, how are you managing? And if you manage all that properly, then by the time you go to bed, you're able to just like relax and let go and surrender your way into sleep, because that's what your body wants to do. And again, I think we've done a whole podcast on this. The third thing is like appropriate exercise, which is like this whole podcast is about appropriate exercise. So like move your body, not doing too much. There is like a high intense workout, like right before bed is going to impact sleep, but also like overtraining can lead to like wacky hormone status for sure. And that applies to even like if you're not in this perimenopause state, like a 30-year-old can feel the impacts of messed up stress hormones from overtraining. So making sure that your like training routine is appropriate and good. Number 4 is an interesting one. Balance your blood sugar, right? Or making sure that your your blood sugar is not out of whack. And so what we're looking at there, and I think have we done whole podcasts on this too, about like, you know, continuous, we could do one again on it, because the continuous glucose monitor is an amazing learning tool to help you understand what your blood sugar is doing. And like, there are certain things you can do to help yourself balance that out. So I won't spend a ton of time on it now, but essentially like trying to avoid eating straight carbohydrate unless you're in a situation where you want straight carbohydrate, right? So that sounds like it's going to be contradictory to like, people probably think Michelle's like totally pro carb. And like, I am, as long as you're like training,
Exercising, yeah, training,
exercising,
yep.
I'm pro carb, right? But then like outside of that, you want to be really focused a lot more on, quality protein and fat and fiber and those things. So if you can keep your blood sugar more balanced, like that is going to help your body. It's going to like set your body up to um, to make the hormones like in the right balance. The last thing, it goes right along with that, but it's nourish your body with the right foods, right? So eating a bunch of processed shit is not going to have any sort of positive impact on your body's ability to make hormones in the right ratios. Right. So like eating food that's reasonably close to the source, and like you're eating like something that used to be alive, like your plants and fruits and vegetables and nuts and like things that what is good for you. Right. And if it comes in a plastic wrapper from the 7-Eleven, it's probably only good for you if you're out riding your bike right now.
Yeah, yeah,
And it
yep.
can be beneficial in that scenario, but like in the rest of the scenarios, you want your omega-3 fatty acids, and you want good protein, and you want nutrients and micronutrients that come from like plant materials. So yeah, those are my top 5 things to like help yourself balance your hormones. You may have more, and all of that is like basic healthy life advice too.
Yeah,
So like you're not going to do yourself any harm by doing these things.
right. Yep. We didn't touch on this, but your guidance about nutrition is absolutely spot on. Also, in my early 40s, when I started to like have massive fatigue and like what's going on and not feeling progress stagnating, right? Even when I did put in the time and effort, like not, I was slowing down, right? Like, and try this training, try that training, nothing. It didn't matter what type of training. I mean, Lucho was like, you're like breaking the laws of physics, both with not able to lose weight, body fat, not just weight, right? And not making any progress despite nailing the training, right? And nailing sleep and nailing nutrition and I mean all the right things. And I was still slowing down and gaining more body fat, which is a whole nother topic. I'm not going to even get into that. It is a side effect, and I'm happy. We should do at some point. Maybe we should do a body composition one because I have
Yeah.
thoughts there. But I always had fantastic cholesterol, great good cholesterol, and relatively low cholesterol, and triglycerides were always totally normal or low, and hit 40 and started to climb, right? Also, my blood A1C, my resting blood. No, there's glucose, and then there's the longer term blood
You have
glucose
fasting
monitor.
glucose, and
Fasting
A1C is like
A1C, the
the
longer term.
long
Yeah,
term one.
both that and cholesterol. So bad cholesterol was climbing, as well as good cholesterol, and so there is a link. And my blood glucose was also rising without any change. Really, I would say actually doubling down on good diet, and they were still getting worse. And so doctors like, well, you just got to improve your diet, and you got to work out more. Oh, and I was having
Yeah.
high blood pressure, right, from water
Yeah.
retention.
Yeah.
So there is a link between no, of course, I'm probably not yet ready for estrogen replacement, but as your estrogen, um, how does there's a link between estrogen and your lipid production in your liver. And typically what we see as women's estrogen declines through perimenopause and menopause is rising levels of the bad cholesterol and triglycerides. And I don't know, I was going to look up the scientific like rationale or reason for that, but essentially there's a conversion process, and estrogen buffers that. And so when you go through, it may have nothing to do with your diet, although it might mean you have to double down on your diet, right, to get yourself back into a baseline healthy area. And so blood sugar, and I did it. We should do a whole podcast on the GCMs, but the fact that I did do a GCM, I was only really eating carbs around training. My diet, I mean, I worked with a very well-known nutritionist, and they're like, it's just really good. Like, I don't know, I don't have any advice for like what else you could do, right? And so there is some evidence, some HRT based studies that suggest that women that do HRT estrogen, that they can start to lower their bad cholesterol postmenopausal. And of course, these studies are not as well publicized, and there's caveats like all studies, but it does seem like that is also an issue, that a lot of times if you go in and your doctor's like, oh, your diet just must be terrible, right? And us athletes were like, what do you mean? Like, I barely eat any red meat, and I don't eat any fats, and I don't eat pizza, right? So I think we're just in a state where we have to pay even closer attention. People say, when you're in your 30s, like an 80-20 diet is appropriate, right? Like 80% good, 20%. When I got into my 40s, I'm like, no, it's more like 95-5. Fingers crossed. Yeah. So, and of course, there's genetic things that play at this as well. And like I know my family history, there's high cholesterol, right? So I know that there's also those genetic risks. But yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add for other things. I think nutrition is super key, and you have to really double down on it. And it's not fun. It's not popular. It's hard sometimes. I would say cut out alcohol. I know then that's also not fun
Mm.
and really hard at times. But if you are someone that's struggling with sleep, alcohol is the number one thing that's going to affect your sleep. I would say if you want to keep it in as an occasional treat, right? Like do it earlier in the evening, and hydrate well afterwards. Have it around food. Don't have it standalone so that it does impact your blood sugar less, if you're going to have it. So that's what I advise my athletes that are really struggling with sleep, and they'll report in Training Peaks like shit sleep, and I'm like, well, did you drink? Yeah, okay, well, it's a trade off, right? You know the cost now, right? Like there's
Mhm.
no other, like, I mean, yes, for women, I'm actually thinking about a guy that I coach, and so he liked to have his post golf beers, right? But then like it impacts his sleep, and so then Saturday ride is not as fun. So you have to place them appropriately. Um, yeah, that's kind of my two. It's just mostly nutrition. Well, I mean, of course, yes, the lowering your stress where you can. Saying no is huge, and I think there's a certain amount of acceptance that has to go along with it. I think I struggled for a long time to accept that's where I was. I wanted to find any other answer, right? Maybe it is my sleep. Maybe it is my blood. Maybe, like I'm still able to like perform, and that might be true, right? Like I might still be able to perform really well, but I also know that now it's going to be a lot harder, both because I still feel this crushing fatigue. So I don't even know if I could train like I used to train at this point and recover. Probably not. I would say, like, logically, probably not. Even though I still have that like drive, like I could still do it. But acceptance is the first step, right, to getting where you want to go, right, on the wherever that might be. I guess I'll also say I think it makes sense to me now why a lot of women do step away from a sport they've done for a long time in this age range when they've performed at a very high level, because it's really hard to continue to see your progress decline. And I wasn't even like a real like an elite at like I was like sort of ish top middle top age group, right? Like it wasn't even that good. You're thinking about the pros, thinking about across any sport, right? It's very difficult, right, to see the decline in your progress. And so the mindset that you have to bring forward to continue on, you have to double down, right? Because you still have the wisdom, you still have the body knowledge,
Probably
and
have more wisdom. There's
you
more
have more
wisdom.
wisdom. Yeah, right. And so that means that you are, better in many, many ways, but your body is not what it used to be. And so you have to accept that, like, yeah, your max squat is gonna decrease at some point. And I know this sounds like a Debbie Downer, right? But that's it's still science, right? We have yet to discover the fountain of youth, right? That literally humans have been searching for generations, right? And I don't know if we will with our current science backlash in this country. Maybe another country, maybe in Europe, we will find the magic medicine, right? But
Well, let's end on a positive note because that was a fuck, Mickey.
you know,
But
it's
I'm going to
yeah.
turn this around. I'm going to land this ship because this is what I would say. I do not have the body that I had when I was 30. Like, right? Like my body is different than it was before, as is my mind. And what I would say is I would not trade my current mind for my previous body, right? Like the knowledge, the wisdom, the saneness, the clarity, that I have, the knowledge, it's just like it's wisdom is what it comes, right? And I just think it's so rare that you would find a 30-year-old who is that, like, because I think that it takes us going through all of the shit in order to like learn the lessons, right? And if you go through the shit and you learn the lessons and then you apply the lessons and you're trying to figure it out, then at some point you end up with like oh, like, yeah, now I have a solid amount of wisdom. Now, what I do wish is that I had my current brain when I was 30. I mean, that would have been amazing.
Well, yeah.
Like if I would have known what I know now, but I just think it's like not a thing, right? So like younger people have like this body that works really well and their brains are just not as well developed. Okay, fine. And they're figuring it out as they go and they have all the ability to figure it out as they go because like they have lots of time and it's okay if they screw it up because like that's how you learn. But yeah, then we get older and it's like, well, our bodies don't work as well, which means we have to be a lot smarter about how we manage ourselves.
Yep. Yep.
But anyway, I do think like even though I'm not as fast as I used to be, and I'm accepting that I will never be as fast as I used to be, I would not trade my current life for my life at 38. Like, like at my fastest, I wouldn't go back to that life. I wasn't happy enough
Mm-hmm.
because I might have been that I needed the training, right? Like I needed the training and the racing and the performance, like in order to like feel fulfilled or be happy or whatever. And now it's like, I don't feel like I necessarily need that to be like the person I want to be. And that in and of itself is a bit of a blessing. And then you can, just change your relationship with the sport that you're doing. Right. So like I still train every single day. Every day
Yeah.
I train.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I like it, right? And it provides benefits and I see other like benefits to doing it that I didn't see when I was obsessed with performance. So I don't know. There's balance and it's okay.
Yeah, I do agree. I think some people have a hard time stepping away and continuing to stay active. They have a hard time wrapping their minds if they're not racing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you have to fight that. If you are thinking of that, right? Like, or, oh, I'll step away, I'll do my own, and try it. Like, if you're someone that you're thinking about stepping away from racing, right? And you're listening to this, you're like, yeah, that's kind of me. I'm not feeling it anymore. Because I work with a lot of athletes that are that way, that are feeling that way. And what I strongly suggest is like take a break, take a step back. I always encourage that, for a while, maybe with the understanding that if you are in our age category ranges, you're probably going to lose your base fitness much faster than you would have 10 years ago. So, just you have to accept that. And then, maybe it is time to try something new, right? Try a sport you haven't tried. Or, can you wrap your mind around like training for life, right? Like training because you actually enjoy it. I mean, if anything, this is what I've coached from day one, right? Like you have to love the training. The racing is the icing on the cake. That's what it was for me. I think we've talked about our differences. I mean, not that I wasn't performance driven, but I don't know. I mean, I have a weird. I don't know. I was not as driven by the comparisons and the performances, and maybe it's because my job is so cutthroat, and I could not handle another self-imposed stress, on myself. That's not to say that I wouldn't go back and do things differently. I would. Absolutely. I totally agree. Like if I knew now what I didn't know then and I could transport myself back, I would absolutely do things differently and I would race much more focused. I would definitely have I actually would say I would have probably driven myself harder knowing that I had less time to really reach my performance heights. I thought I had more time. And again, it is what it is, and I've accepted that. But yeah, I think you have to keep moving, right? Like, and I'm the same. Like, I go out hiking with my dogs every day, and it brings me a ton of joy to watch them at the height of their athleticism, right? Running around in the mountains, and it's just life giving, right? And that maybe I will get back to training at some sort, but it will probably look very different, and I'll have very different aspirations than what I have to. So that's you can still be doing amazing things and being very healthy. And I think ultimately we all want to be walking and hiking and lifting the bags of, I don't know, dog food up off the floor when we're 90, right? Because, 40 pounds of dog food's pretty heavy. It's not really, but it will be when I'm 90. So I want to make, 40 should feel easy right now, right? Because at
Yeah.
90, it's going to feel real hard.
Yeah.
Anyways. Okay. We've
This is our longest
enough.
podcast ever. We have a lot to talk about.
We do. Well, let us know, right? If you have other things to consider, for us to consider, that have worked for you, that you've struggled with, whether it's, direct symptoms of perimenopause or menopause, if it's mindset around racing, or any of that stuff, because we've I'm sure fielded. I know I fielded. I mean, that's for most of my athletes that are in this age range. That's what we talk about. It's setting appropriate aspirations, not expectations anymore. And, many of them are having fantastic race seasons and adventures and really enjoying the process of training. It's not easy. It's not like you can just flip a switch and be like, okay, well, this is the way, this is the new. Maybe it is for some people. I don't think that, at least not for the athletes that I work
No,
with.
I think most people have to go through a whole
Struggle.
process on that. Well, if we talk again in 2 weeks, it'll be the Tuesday after the Women's World Championship in Kona. So, like,
So we'll
maybe
have
that can be we'll do like a takeaways from Kona.
yeah, that'll be exciting. Are you going to go over?
Yeah. I
You're
don't think
definitely
so. I
going.
still don't have plans. I've done it in the past, where even like the week before I decided on a whim to go, but like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm going to stay here. I actually think I'll get more out of the race if I stay here, like,
Yeah,
and watch it
yeah,
from home. So I'm likely to stay here and watch it, and we'll do a what did we learn
yeah.
from that one. So,
Cool.
all right,
Thanks, Michelle. We'll see everyone later.
yeah, take care.